We are doing Berachot, top 10 on 57. The Gemara, we're talking about dreams, continuation of a discussion about dreams, and we're going to talk about seeing certain people with particular names or seeing the letters of their name. That's number one. Number two is the significance of saying somebody or yourself reciting Yehei Shmei Rabbah, reciting the Shema, wearing tefillin. 3, we're going to talk about Freud and dreams that really the Talmud should feel are inappropriate, and yet, in certain circumstances, not only says it's okay, but finds great significance in. Number 4 is dreams about the different species that the land of Israel is blessed with. Number 5 is dreams about a beautiful esrog, the 4 species. Number 6 is how to dream of becoming a Rosh Hashiva. Number 7 is the 3 sages, Ben Azeh, Ben Zoma, and Acher in a dream. Number 8 is certain things that are considered a 60th of paradise, death. Number 9 is shoes of dead people. And number 10 is when Moshiach comes, will we accept converts? Will everyone convert? Will no one convert? Or just those who, kind of like now. So those are the outline of the top 10. Let's jump right into number 1. Number 1 is the Gemara says on 57a towards the top, Haroah Huna b'chalom, somebody who sees Huna, one of the sages, in a dream, that signifies that Nes Na'aseh Lo, a miracle will be done for them. Chanina, Chananya, Yochanan, these other 3 names, they all have something in common, that they have the letter Chet and Nun, 2 nuns to be precise. If you see any of these 3 scholars, Chanina, Chananya, and Yochanan, in a dream, Nisei Nisim Nasalo, they'll have a double miracle, presumably because they have 2 times the letter Nun, as opposed to Huna that only has it once. Then the Gemara continues and says, that's really going to be the focus, is this idea of the Nun and the double Nun, or the Chen, the Chanan element of those 3 names, the miraculous or the grace. But to continue just a little bit for our understanding with it, if you see a hesped means a eulogy, but the particular letters are significant here, the Hey and the Samach. Min hashamayim chasu alav v'pada'ohu. Heaven has had mercy on that person and redeemed him. V'hani milibiksava. This only is when you see this in writing, as opposed to, you don't actually see the eulogy, you see the letters of Hesped. Now, let's take a look at Rashi here to help us understand this. So Rashi says that by Huna, the reason why, if you see that in a dream, that you'll have a miracle is because of the letter Nun. And Nun stands for the Nun of Nes, of miracle. So, and he already says, it's you seeing the name Huna written out. It's not the person, it's the letters. And Chanina, Nun and Harbe, multiple Nuns, many Nuns, although it's just 2. Nisim Rabim, lots of miracles. And then, this is only when it's written down. Again, Rashi reiterates himself, Akulakai. That statement is not just going on Hesped, on the letters for eulogy, but all of these other names of starting from Huna, Shurahuna, Chananya, Otevasu Shal Hesped, Ksuva. All of these things have to be spelled out. Dimashma Chasu Alav Pateo. So then it has the meaning of either miracle, miracles, or redeem. Now, the Marsha, the famous commentator that's an expert in the Agadata, asks a question, which is, if Rashi is just basing this on the letter Nun, what about other people's names that have Nun? What about Aaron? Aaron has the letter Nun. My name, Naphtali, has the letter Nun. If you see Aaron in a dream, does that mean that you're going to have a miracle? So there could be, and also, what's pushing Rashi to say that it's going on all of these things, the letters rather than the person in the dream. They're seeing the letters of these names. And why does Rashi reiterate it again and again? He says it first time, he says it at the end, he keeps saying it. Why is that so important for Rashi to say that? Now, the obvious answer is because if you look at the word for hesped, for eulogy, Rashi's taking a minimalist approach, which is the emphasis here is on letters. And even letters that are close, the word for chas, which is to have compassion and forgive, is hes. If we interchange the hey with the chet, because it's very close, the hey and the chet look almost identical, and the samach of the hesped with the chas, so you have the same root, the same word of chas, of being forgiven. Again, Rashi is basically saying it's like some form of association. Word association, that this is the closest thing. This is, we take something out of a word, extract it, make it similar to it, and give them that. So the question is, why not Aaron? And the answer is, maybe Aaron also would signify a miracle. Or Aaron has another significance. Perhaps Aaron is a abider of peace, because Aaron is the peacemaker. So it doesn't mention Aaron because he's already associated with something more individualistic than the nun of his name. That could be one answer. Let's take a look at the Maharshah's answer. The Maharshah seems to make more sense in that the Maharshah says that the root here is the chen. Chen is, I think that's the Maharshah's answer. Chen is translated, I don't know that there's a great English translation. The best translation we have is the word grace. So Huna doesn't really have chen in it, but it has, again, if hey and chet are close enough to be interchangeable like they are by the eulogy by Hesped, so let's say they are for Huna as well. So it's Huna, chen, and Chanina, chen, Chananya, chen, Yochanan, chen. Okay, so that's an answer. What chen has that's beautiful is that chen we don't quite understand. Like when you find somebody, when somebody has grace, a lot of people think of it as falling in love, grace. It doesn't mean you fall in love like this is your spouse, chen. It could mean that also, but it could mean people that they just, there's it's hard to see the wrong in them. It doesn't mean that they're perfect people, but there's something about them you just like, and you dismiss the not great things about them. And we ask, we ask God to find us to be charming and good, even though we know we're not perfect. So that's fits in with the Maharshal. Let's go a little deeper with Reb Tzadok, who says that under the discussion about the prayer for Hanukkah, when we say Matisyahu ben Yochanan Kohen Gadol. So we know the idea of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is somebody who's given over to serving God. But he says it's in the word, like Matisyahu, right, that has God's name, the Yahu in it, Ben Yochanan, the son of Yochanan. If you break that up, you have Yud Vav, which is also two of God's four-letter name, the Yud and the Vav. And Chanan is from granting of grace. So God is given over, Matisyahu, the one who's given over to God, who's being granted grace from God. That is the Kohen Gadol. That is who we're eliciting in the miracle of Hanukkah, that level of dedication to Hashem. So with that in mind, let's go back to Hanan, and he references our Gemara that we see from Yochanan, these names, that it's Nisei Nisim, it's a miracle of miracles that will be done. So if we look at these names, they all have something in common, that they're exemplary people. So for example, Hanida ben Dosa did certain types of prayers where and that were extraordinary, that we wouldn't allow ordinary people to actually do. They'd be wrong for certain people. And Yochanan and Hananya and Yochanan as well, each one is exemplary beyond the lifnim ashur sadin, beyond the call of requirement of what they should do. They're all overstepped their bounds in the positive sense, which then would elicit divine chen, which then would mean that God acts with us with nisei nisim, with miracles or miracle of miracles. So that it could be a combination of the nuns with the nisim that are engendered because of divine chen. So that would be one way of interpreting it, loosely based on Reb Tzadok, but just really, after thinking about it, that makes the most sense to me. See what we've talked about earlier in earlier dafim about Hananya and Hanina, to see that this idea should hold up to some level of scrutiny. Okay, so as for Rashi, Rashi is, like I said, he's the minimalist. He's going after the letters here. Let's go to number 2. Number 2 is very interesting. The Gemara continues with the theme of seeing certain things in dreams. If somebody sees themselves responding to Kaddish by saying, Amen Yeheshmei Rabba Mivarach, may God's name be great and blessed, which is one way of translated, meaning may that not the name of God, which currently isn't well known by everyone. There are other religions that have other ideas about don't exactly exemplify the idea of one God. So may God's name, Rabbah, become, great and known, Mavarach and blessed. That's one way of reading it. The other way of reading it is Yeheshmei Rabbah, may God's great name, Mavarach, be blessed. Okay. And Tosfos points that out, not here, but in other places, the difference in reading it. So you see yourself doing that, you are assured to have a place in the world to come. If you dream about reciting the Shema, you're fit to have the divine presence rest upon you, except if you don't, it's because your generation doesn't merit it. If you see yourself in tefillin in the dream, anticipate greatness, because the verse says the nations of the world will see that the name of God is upon you. It doesn't continue, but the rest of the verse says, and they'll be in awe of you. In fact, the Chabad Rebbe, when he started the Mivtza Tefillin, I think it was during the war in Israel in 1968, he says, if by putting on tefillin, the enemies of Israel will have awe of them. And I mean, it didn't necessarily work on a practical level many times over our history, but the idea is there. The idea is even in the darkest times, maybe they couldn't express their awe and admiration for the Jews who wore tefillin, but on a subconscious level, it had some impact, and now maybe it's manifesting more. Again, I don't know that this is meant to be just like a way of showing yourself to be powerful on a simple level. It may be an internal strength that external power is afraid of and tries to blot out. But be that as it may, those are the 3 things here, A, B, and C, we'll call them. Now, let's talk a little bit about A and B, because there seems to be, on a simple level, almost as if I were a critical scholar of the Talmud and wanted to always be changing how to read things and saying, well, maybe they got things confused and the Masorah. I would arguably say, I'm not going to, but I would if I was that type of person who was always looking to change everything, that they got things confused. And really, if you say, Amen Yeheshmei Rabbah, you are fitting to have the Shekhinah rest upon you, but your generation doesn't merit it. And if you see yourself saying Shema, you're fitting to have a place in the world to come. Why would I maybe even possibly think to say that? Because we know Amen Yeheshmei Rabbah is really about the replacement of the Beit HaMikdash. And in fact, the Gemara at the end of Sota says, in the time of the darkness of Galut, when everything is getting bitter, and it describes the progressive darkness and how only bitter stolen waters are preferred over the permitted, and talking about how the fruits are not even sweet anymore, and all the things that are terrible about the world. So what does God have in this dark times? And it says He has the Amen. I think it says something like Amen Yeheshmei Rabbah. Of the Agadata, or he has the what does it say exactly in Sot, in the end of Sot? It says something like the Siddur de Kedusha, the order of Kaddish, which is probably the Uva L'Tzion. Rashi, I believe, says it's the Uva L'Tzion prayer. So there's two ways of learning that. Either it's the Uva L'Tzion that says Ba'ata Kaddish Yoshatil Sisel V'Karzel Zav Elmar, and then it says Kadosh. It says Kadosh. It says the verse of the prophets, and then interprets it or it translates it into the Aramaic, and that would mean that it's talking about the Shekhinah, basically the levels of sanctity that in a way are temporarily calling out God's greatness because we don't have the place to do it, so we just have the ideas and the words to say it in, and that takes the place of the Shekhinah's presence in the Beit HaMikdash. Therefore, what I would have thought to say is that this is the Hashra'at HaShekhinah. This is where the divine presence is today. Like the Dal Amat. This is like the equivalent of Ein Lo Lakadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olam El Dal Amat Shalacha. Really, the Talmud basically says there's only really two places where God manifests as Shekhinah today, within the halachic framework, the discussion of halacha, and this order of this element of tefillah, the kind of call and response that everybody understands. So that could be the Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah of, let's say, after the rabbi gives a shir and they say Kaddish to Rabbanan and they say Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. That like exemplifies the extolling of God, which is basically a form of Hashra'at HaShekhinah if done in the proper way. That's what I would have thought. And Kriya Shema, I would have thought, is Ben Olam Haba, because after all, if you say the Shema, you remember all the beautiful things we said earlier in Berachot about reciting the Shema. It contains so many mitzvot, whether it's the Achdut Hashem, the Avat Hashem, the unification of God, His loving Him, listening to Him, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, the particular mitzvahs. It's got so much in it that if you did that, if you said it and you meant it and you lived it, of course you would be merit to have a place in the world to come. So why, in fact, does the Gemara not say that? Could be if we look a little bit deeper. For example, if we analyze another Gemara that talks about Amen and Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah on Kuf Yud Tes, Amid Beis 119b of Shabbos, we'll see that Rosh Lakish, for example, says in that context, whoever answers Amen b'chol kocho, says Amen with all of their might, is a Ben Olam Haba, is going to merit the world to come. Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen explains, so for example, because what that means is that you're using your koach hadibur, you're putting yourself into your words, and your words are a manifestation of the governance, so to speak, of ultimately God's governance, because you're saying God is in control, like you're saying Amen or Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah, and that's connected to the idea of Shabbos, like Shabbos is God's day, and therefore what you're doing is you're basically manifesting the world to come, that even though we don't really acknowledge it and see it, but you are acknowledging it, you are saying it. So by answering Amen or Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah, which is basically more than just Amen, how much more so you would merit the world to come. Perhaps Amen needs to be said with all of your strength. Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah in a dream, that's enough just to say it, to be deserving of a place in the world to come. Let's talk a little bit about this Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah and Olam Haba. Olam Haba is the world that is coming, but we're going to learn about Shabbos later. I mentioned that there's a parallel between the koach hadibur, the power of words, as Tzadok says, and the koach of Shabbos. And we'll learn one of the later teachings today will be how the power of Shabbos is related to Olam Haba, because Shabbos is me'ein Olam Haba. Shabbos is a taste, a little bit of paradise. So what's happening is when you're saying Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah, may God's name become great, for example, or may God's great name be blessed, which are either meaning, either way of putting the comma in, either before the Rabbah or after the Rabbah. Either way, they share something in common, that perhaps the world isn't as it is right now, but it will be, and you're creating that reality by making that statement. So that's a Ben Olam Haba. You don't necessarily have Olam Haba revealed in this world, but it's already here. There's a slight awareness of it at certain times, at certain proclamations, and that's why it would make sense. Then, when you say the Kriya Shema, why would you have Ashrat Shekhinah? Let's take the Rambam, for example. The Rambam is a very controversial position on on Nevuah and Mar Nevuchim. He learns very similar to Greek philosophy that if you exemplify self-control to the point where you're not taken over by passion, and you have a healthy sense of mind, I'm oversimplifying it for the sake of brevity here, that combination of the mind's clarity and not being clouded by your own desires will almost automatically lead you to Shekhinah, lead you to divine, to prophecy, which is somehow connected to Shekhinah in his understanding. Like it links you up to this, what he calls the active intellect, which is a philosophical term. But it's not exactly like the Greeks, because the Greeks thought it was like the highest kind of one of this heightened states of awareness, that if you did all of these things, you checklisted everything, you would get it. You would automatically get it. The Rambam says, no, you don't automatically get it because there could be something in the way. So the thing could be in the way is that there's a sadness in the world because we're in a state of exile, and the generation, so to speak, doesn't deserve it. So that would kind of make sense in a strange way with the Rambam. You say the Kriya Shema, it means you believe in one God, the way probably the Rambam believed in one God if you were following the Rambam L'Shitasa, and you were a philosopher about it, and you love God, which means you left behind certain worldly pleasures that would take away of your love of God, as the Rambam describes in Mishnah Torah, Mar Nevuchim, and you studied the Torah, and you kept the Torah, and you did the mitzvah. So what that would do is that would basically essentially guarantee you Hasharat Hashchina, the divine presence. The only thing is, the generation isn't fit. Okay, so that would work well with that. You don't need to be Maimonidean to accept how the Talmud says it. There's other ways to reconcile why specifically reciting the Shema and Hasharat Hashchina go together. The third thing, which is interesting, this thing about tefillin and greatness, is there's two ways to understand the greatness. One is fear, simply fear. They'll fear us. The other way is it's respect. It's not necessarily fear. Sometimes respect leads to fear. Other times it doesn't lead to actual fear. And be that as it may, there may have been times when tefillin was a precaution against our enemies attacking us, like the Rebbe suggested in the war in Israel, I think in '68. But there could have been other times that we were attacked. The tefillin didn't help us on a superficial level, but internally there was still respect for people who stood for something. The very people who attacked us really wanted to kill themselves because their lives were meaningless. And the tefillin just proved that they had nothing other than being animals. So they just proved that they were animals by killing innocent people. So even if it didn't work to protect us on a physical level, on a spiritual level, it did work on some level. I'm not saying it worked. It didn't. People died. 6 million people died in the Holocaust. It didn't work. But at the very least, it's a reminder: don't become like don't kill innocent people. Be a good person. So that's true greatness. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3 is Freud or Jung, or how did the rabbis understand dreams? So the Gemara says the following thing: somebody who cohabits with their mother in a dream will anticipate understanding. Why? Because the verse says, for if you call out to understanding, the word for ki'im, for if, is the same words im as mother, aim, if you pronounce it differently, associated with the words bina. Again, if you learn like Rashi, it's simply wordplay. But that's if you say Rashi is doing l'shitasa, which means he's following through with his chanina, his huna, chanina. There's just the letters. So ki'im labanim, the verse associates the word im. We associate that with aim, and it's right next to the word bina. The Kabbalists will have nothing of just that simple association. They say, no, Bina is really mother. Mother is the one who gives understanding, who understand. The mother, when I see a mother with a baby, the baby is making little noises. I have no idea what the baby is crying about. The mother understands the baby. I mean, obviously not all mothers and not all cries and not all babies, but, that's often the case. So there's some level of understanding with the mother that's unique to mothers. And Habal Nara Hamurasa, if somebody cohabits with a betrothed Nara, a young woman, in a dream. It's a very young woman. We wouldn't even really talk about, her age is very young. It could only go up to 20 in very limited circumstances. So she's either younger than that or at most 19. So Yitzapil Torah, that person should anticipate Torah. As the verse says, Torah tzibel Moshe ma'orasha kilas Yaakov. The inheritance of those who are the community of Jacob is the Torah is our inheritance. The Torah that God commanded us, or Moses gave us, is the inheritance of the community of Jacob. Now, the word for inheritance, ma'orasha, if you just change one dot on the shin to sin, to ma'orasa, it means the naira hamorasa, this betrothed woman. Elamorasa. So what that means is that's something. So again, if you're learning, it's just words, that's all it is. So it's simply that verse, change a letter, has a double meaning, fine. But really, again, everybody who doesn't learn just like that will say, psychologically, the betrothed, the woman who's rasa, she actually is really married without the kedushin is much more than betrothed. It's translated as betrothed because there's no better translation. It's really married without the benefits of marriage. They're married with in a halachic framework minus certain privileges such as living together. But what it does represent is this young woman who's betrothed, and even more, to another man, and yet, so she's certainly forbidden to you, and yet the Gemara says that represents Torah, greatness in Torah. Now it gets even weirder. Somebody who cohabits with a sister in the dream should anticipate wisdom. Why? Because here the verse says, Emar l'chachma achoti atel, wisdom, you're my sister. Somebody who lives with a married woman in a dream is assured a place in the world to come. And this is only if you didn't know her and you didn't think about her the night before. Because if you did, obviously you're just, it's a fantasy you have. There's nothing holy about that at all. On the contrary, it's not holy. So let's take a look at this, talk a little bit about Freud, Jung. How do we see these things? So the simple thing is many dreams are simply a fantasy of things you're thinking about, wish fulfillment, and that's the Gemara warns us. In fact, the Rashi goes out of his way to say any of these people. That means even if you saw your mother, your sister, and then you had a dream about them, that is a sign that you are fantasizing, you have a secret wish. But you don't necessarily have to, obviously if you thought about them in that type of inappropriate way and you dreamed about them, there would be nothing holy. It would be, to the contrary, very perverted type of person to be thinking about a mother or sister like that, or Naira Hamarasa for that matter like that. But it could be that the real issue is if you saw any of these women that were not a mother or sister. The mother or sister could be somebody you've seen but you never thought of in any sexual way. And it's not like somebody who never met their sister or never met their mother. But what it means is that intimacy can have another meaning. It doesn't mean that the person literally wants to sleep with this married woman who he doesn't know, hasn't ever fantasized about it or thought about, and it could come up in a dream, or their sister, and the person doesn't, in their right mind, they would never think to do that. Forget about doing it, they never fantasize about it, and yet here they had this dream. So because creativity can sometimes manifest itself as a dream of intimacy. So if the person is anticipating something creative, they could see themselves with a woman that would be totally inappropriate, and yet it could represent them becoming a scholar, them becoming a wise person, an understanding person, and even a Rosh Hashiva. We'll talk about that later. So it could also come out of change. Sometimes, surprisingly, somebody who's about to settle down, they're like about to get married, and they're like, that would be the time you think they would not have any fantasies about anyone else, and all of a sudden that's exactly when they have a fantasy, and it could be somebody that they never ever thought about really in that way, because it's the unconscious mind kind of playing this game, saying, are you really ready to eliminate all these other people that you didn't even think about in that way, but now they're gone, or this is, we don't even understand what it is. So, or it could be not about you and your romantic life. It could be about you and your future, moving to another city, changing your career, giving up on something to pursue a dream that you're not so certain of. So all of those things allow the Talmud, even though they didn't necessarily understand dreams quite like the way modern dream interpreters do, but they understood intuitively that there were things in dreams that didn't mean exactly what the dream indicated. They meant something else. There were great people who could never see themselves really fantasizing about these things, still having these dreams, even admitting to the dreams and saying how things like that would come true to them, as we'll see. And what that meant is that they understood that the dreams had other meanings beyond than just a simple interpretation of facts. Dreams are not facts. Sometimes they are just wish fulfillments. Other times they're representing things. And all of these things are explained in multiple sources of why we associate, let's say, wisdom with sister. It's that verse, but it's much more than that. A sister, for example, actually represents somebody who's very close to you, who you don't think about romantically, but you think about in a more steady way, that you don't have to worry about ups and downs and rejections because they're there for you always. There's a certain consistency. That's why we say, Piskili achoti rayati. We say in a relationship, we want to have a relationship with our beloved like a sister and a lover. We want both elements of romance that waxes and wanes, but also achoti, stability. So, okay, certain meanings here that are beyond the actual sister. And the same thing with the married woman. Obviously, married woman, it could mean simply a wish fulfillment. The person's fantasizing about a married woman, had that in a dream. But if that's not the case, it's not the person who's looking at this woman and leering at her and thinking about her, and it just happens, it could represent a ben olam haba, a portion in the world to come. Okay, that's number 3. Now we go to number 4, and that's with the 7 species. The Gemara doesn't say it's the 7 species, but if you look carefully, you have all the species that the Torah blesses the land of Israel with in Deuteronomy, and also we learn out so many things about Berachot Hamazon, about the grace after meals and Brachot, and Shiurim, measurements for these things in Gemara Brachos and other places. So the Gemara starts by saying, Haroa gefen te'una b'chalom. If you see a vine full of grapes in a dream, so your wife won't have a nephil, a miscarriage. And that's because the verse says your wife will be like a full vine. If you see a branch of a vine, anticipate Moshiach. As the verse says, he will tie his donkey to the vine. And if you see a fig in a dream, so we've got so far grapes, now we get to the fig, the Torah will be safe, guarded, because, a lot of times we learn Torah and it's not safe, we forget it. And that's because the verse says, Netzer te'ene yochel, period. The protector of a fig tree will eat the fruit. If you see, third thing, rimonim, pomegranates in a dream, small ones, your business will become fruitful. Big ones, business will increase like a pomegranate. If it's split open, if you're a Torah scholar, anticipate Torah as a proof text from a verse for that. If you're a not learned person, anticipate mitzvos, because even the rekanim, even the empty ones, are full of mitzvahs as a pomegranate. The famous thing we say about the pomegranate a number of times in the Talmud. If you see an olive in a dream, so your business will be fruitful and increase and endure like olives. Olives are hardy, and that's the fruit. But if you see the tree, then you'll have a lot of children, and he brings a proof for that. Your children will be like olive shoots. Some say if you see an olive in a dream, you'll have a good name. Like it says, God called you a name, a leafy olive tree, beautiful. If you see olive oil, anticipate the illumination of Torah. Like it says, V'yikhrei lech Hashem zayzach, take for yourself the oil of an olive that's pure for lighting the menorah with. If you see dates, then your sins will have ended. There's a proof text for that. Okay, that's pretty much it for that. So we see here this idea of dreaming about these special foods that Israel is blessed with. Each one has, by dint of its biblical verse, some association with a particular blessing, as we just outlined. There's a lot to say about this, because the truth is that you could say this seems to be almost like a step up from just the words. It seems almost like that we have like three categories so far. We start with the letters, like it says, if you see the words for Huna or Chanina, and then we go to figures like a sister, and then we go to fruits. So we're letters, people, and then fruits, and the fruits have a very visceral kind of sense of satisfaction. So when you see, and again, I just want to put in a little note for all of these dreams, is that bad dreams could be good for you, and good dreams aren't always good for wicked people, because good dreams for wicked people, it gives them a false sense of how great they are, and it is something good for them, but it's instead of real greatness, which is doing the right thing. So it's false sense of security for the wicked, and bad dreams is a wake-up call for the righteous who become better because of it. So I just want to mention that, even though we learned that a while back, not that long ago, but even though it was just a page or two ago for our sheer purposes, that happened to be a little while ago. So even a good dream could give somebody a false sense of complacency. Like a person could have one of these dreams, a sexual fantasy, and say, oh, I'm a ben olam haba. Well, guess what? Not you, because you're a Russia. So you thought of it as a good dream, and you're misunderstanding it, and you're still going to go get to Gehenna because you didn't make yourself a better person. And the same thing with the fruit. So all of this has kind of qualifications of how it actually will manifest. So that in mind, let's take a look at a couple of these things. So you're talking about the wine or the vine, and then we're talking about the pomegranate. And the pomegranate, like how we're dividing it into, let's say the open pomegranate, are you somebody who's a Torah scholar or not? It doesn't say that it's the same meaning. That anybody before we were saying, if somebody is, seeing a vision of them cohabiting with their mother, they're gonna increase in understanding. It doesn't say, but if they're stupid, they'll increase in something else. It doesn't say that. But here it makes a division. If you're smart, it's going to be Torah. If not, it's going to be mitzvahs. Why? So the simple answer is because they both have their own verse. It has two meanings. The open pomegranate, the seeds of the pomegranate has two meanings. So look at who you are, which of the meanings fits you, and that's what it is. Okay, so we are on to number 5, because of course we got to keep moving. Number 5 is about the 4 species, the esrog. At first it starts talking about the myrtle, and then it talks about haro esrog bechalom. If you see the esrog in a dream, hadarhu lifnei kona, you're beautiful in the eyes of your maker. Like it says, pri eitz hadar kapos tmarim. Take for yourself the fruit of a beautiful tree, the branches of the date palm. Now the truth is the Talmud has a big debate. What does that word hadar? Hadar could mean beauty, which is a great word. It means, it could have halachic implications of how nice the esrog has to be. It could lead us into the idea of hidur mitzvah, the idea of doing a mitzvah in an exemplary way, that even though the headquarters would be from the esrog, it could extend possibly not as much of a requirement of whether it's kosher or not, but as a better way to do the mitzvah would be whether it's getting a pair of tefillin or talis or any mitzvah that you have to buy the object to do the mitzvah with, buying a better talis, a better mezuzah, would fulfill that idea of the hidur mitzvah. And for whatever reason, the required hidur to some halachic standard is by esrog. In other words, if it isn't hadar, if it doesn't have certain qualifications in its appearance, it's no longer beautiful and would not be kosher. Again, there are other interpretations of hadar is a defining quality of what esrog is. For example, hadar bi'ilano, that it stays for a long time in the tree. There's different stages of growth, bigger, smaller ones in the tree at the same time, and so on. So, but for the dream purposes, we're going with hadar, with beauty. Which, by the way, doesn't mean, I was just thinking something, what if somebody rules the other way, that hadar is not about beauty? Does this dream not have the same meaning? And the answer is no, it has the same meaning. Because it's a valid understanding of what pre-Eitz Hadar means. It's a beautiful thing. And even those who don't require certain things, it is required to have some hidur mitzvah here. Or if not required, it's definitely something we want to do. So therefore, yes, it would apply to you as well. This goes back to what exactly is the nature of a mitzvah. There's two ways to see a nature of a mitzvah. God told us to do it. We don't really understand it. Just do it. And that act of obedience connects you to God, and that's all wonderful. The other explanation of the mitzvah is each mitzvah has a particular emphasis of what it's trying to do to affect within us. So, for example, if you take the lulav, this is in the Moshiach, you should take it for yourself. The Talmud says you can't borrow it, you can't steal it. The first day has to be really yours. So that means that when it comes to the four minim, the species, and particularly the lulav, but all of the four species equally, really, it's just called lulav hagazel. The chapter of the stolen four species is headed by the stolen lulav. But really, all four is that you need to be very careful about what you take in your life. It should belong to you. If you borrow, be careful to give it back, and so on, and not to over borrow and so on. That could be it. Or in addition to that, you have this idea of the esrog. It's very expensive. It has certain beauty in it, so that a lot of times we want everything in life to just work. Either it works or it doesn't work. Like, is my phone work or it doesn't work? But sometimes something of beauty it's not required for the minimum, so to speak. It's just enhances everything. So the Torah is saying, this mitzvah, I want you to, the point of this mitzvah is not just that to get it done, but to get it done in a beautiful thing. I'm giving you something beautiful to do the mitzvah with, and it should be particularly beautiful, so that you see the quality of beauty. So therefore, when you have that in a dream, so what does that mean? That means that you are beautiful in God's eyes. I mean, what a goal to have, is that we want to be God's esrog. How do you become God's esrog? Beautify your mitzvah, so to speak, and God will in turn look at you, hopefully the way we look at Him, and look us in a beautiful way as well. And then it goes on and says other things about the lulav. For example, it says if you dream about the lulav, then you only have one heart to your Father in heaven. One of the things we say about the lulav is that the shedra, the spine, that the leaves don't go away from the spine, or if they do, they could be brought back together. They're not hardened and away. So that represents this kind of unity, this one heart. And again, that represents the idea that when you have a mitzvah, the physical quality of the mitzvah represents something. There's some relationship between an idea and the actuality, that when those two things come together, it really is solid. So that's perhaps the esrog, just like I'm talking about the beauty of the esrog, the singularity of the lulav, and that's why you have one lulav, but you'd have two adasim. Three adasim and two aravot. The lulav represents the unity, so there's only one. Okay, now we come to number 5. No, that was number 5. We come to number 6. How to dream to become a Rosh Hashiva. This is a little strange. Excuse me for the strangeness here. So, if somebody sees a goose in a dream, they should anticipate wisdom. Like it says, wisdom cries out in the street. And if somebody cohabits with it, they'll become a Rosh Yeshiva, the head of a yeshiva. Rab Ashi says, I saw a goose and cohabited with it in a dream, and I arose to greatness, became a Rosh Yeshiva. Okay, let's stop for a moment. That's okay. What do we do with that? So, let's actually read a little bit further, because the Talmud will skip slightly ahead, and it talks about some other things in the middle that we're not going to go into. Do that on your own time. But here it goes on and says, if you go into this is closer to the bottom, but not all the way at the bottom of this page, 57a. If you go into a marsh in a dream, you'll become a head of a yeshiva. If you go into a forest, you'll become a head of a smaller group. And that reviews the sessions. Rav Papa, Rav Huna, the son of Rabbi Yeshua, each saw a dream. Rav Papa went into a marsh. He became the head of the yeshiva. Rav Huna went into a forest or a swamp. He became the head of the smaller group. So others say, no, they both dreamt that they entered into a marsh. Rav Papa had a bell in the dream, so the bell signified he would make more noise. He became the head of the yeshiva. And Rav Huna didn't have the bell, so he just became the head of a smaller group. Rav Ashi again says, I dreamed about entering into the marsh with a bell, and I rang it noisily. Now, we just learned before that Rav Ashi had this dream about the cohabiting with the goose, and he has this other dream about going into the marsh with this bell ringing. So what's going on here? What's going on? So let's first say the goose makes a lot of noise. So there's a verse and there's an actuality. They both, again, at this point, the verses are not just verses. They're not just wordplay. They're visceral things that we associate a goose with honking and making noise. Now, there's this power of speech. I mean, it does. If you're a bumbling idiot, you open your mouth. It doesn't necessarily have power, although you can frighten people with your words. But this idea that the Rosh Yeshiva has the power to, by his edicts, by his halachic rulings, to have the hearts and the minds of the people who listen to them. So the goose also, by the way, is a fierce animal. It will defend its territory. I know, because on Riverside, by the Hudson, there's geese there, and there's goslings, and they're very aggressive to people who encroach on their space. So they're not just loud, they're also protecting what they consider important to them. So, okay, but why the goose, I get, but why cohabiting with the goose? It's strange enough, this incestuous cohabitations and dreams are strange enough for the Gemara to even give that any credence, any positive meaning ever is strange enough. But now to go to bestiality and to give that a very positive thing, and for a particular rabbi to stand up and say, yes, I had that dream and I became a Rosh Yeshiva. Now, it could be that he said that any dream that has to be connected to being a Rosh Yeshiva, this guy had. Apparently, he also had the dream about going into the marsh with the bell and ringing around his neck. Okay, he liked the dream. So that leads me to another question. I'm going to avoid this question. I'm going to put it on the back burner. I'm just going to say that there's two worlds that have a large effect on a lot of people. One is the Hasidic world, and one is the Yeshivish world. The Hasidic world, particularly in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, one of the presumptions of what they were correcting was the overemphasis of ego in the world of the Torah scholars. However, within a couple generations, the Rebbes were wealthy beyond belief, more powerful than any non-Hasidic Rosh Yeshiva or Gadol. So the question then becomes, it's like, listen to what they say, but not what they do. So they both have their own challenges. Today, for example, in the yeshiva, well, let's start with the yeshiva world. In the yeshiva world, they start telling children at the tender age of 5 or 6 that your goal in life should be a Gadol. And A, it's the dangerous thing to tell people because most people are not going to become a Gadol. And B, the ones who still have that fantasy of being a Gadol, they're huge balei gaiva. It turns them, not necessarily, but I can't help but think that the majority of them are overemphasizing their knowledge and how great they are, and it's just like. But then again, in the Hasidic world, they're no better. They won't say they want to be a Gadol, but they still have their same ego drives, and I'm including myself in that world. I'm not going to make it but I'm a saint. So I'm just pointing out this problem. The problem is that are we feeding into a pre-existing problem, or is it okay? Here, the rabbis in the Talmud wanted to be a Rosh Hashiva, and they dreamt dreams about a Rosh Hashiva, even if it was inappropriate, or if that's what it meant, they were willing to say it and bring themselves as a proof for this. So the answer is that the question remains a question. There always needs to be a corrective. Anytime you have something like a Hasidic Rebbe that can have way too much power, there's always a question there. Meaning, like, for example, let's take the Chabad movement. I'm not going to talk about whether the Rebbe had too much power. I'm going to ask a much better question. Why did the Rebbe want no other Rebbe after him? So the simple answer is because he believed he was Moshiach. Wrong. That's not the reason. I'll tell you why I can prove you that's not the reason. Because there's two halves of Chabad. I don't know what percentage is what. Half of them believe the Rebbe is Moshiach. The other half don't believe the Rebbe is Moshiach, or they can argue about what they really believe. But that's what it is. Half and half. I'm not saying which half is 50% or 20%. There's this division. Who believes that Chabad should have another Rebbe? Not even 1%. They all agree, both the Meshachis and the non-Meshachis agree, no other Rebbe. Why? Because the Rebbe didn't want another Rebbe. Why? Because it's wrong to have a Rebbe. Why? Because there's too much power in one person's hand to be able to handle that amount of power. Why was it okay for the Rebbe? I'm not here to answer that question. He needed to do what he needed to do. He did a great thing, so maybe it was okay for one person to have that power. Maybe it couldn't have happened without a Rebbe. Now that he already implemented what he implemented, it's going without any one leader. You could say, oh, he's still here. Whatever. Say whatever you want. It doesn't need one leader anymore. Why? Because the Rebbe recognized that it could be abuse of power with one person having so much power. It's not answering the question, but it is answering the question. It's a recognition that Chabad has that it does not want a Rebbe. Meshachist or not, does not want a new Rebbe. Question now remains for the Litvischer world. What does it mean today to say you want to be a Gadol? Yeah, again, it's just a question. The answer has to be, there has to be a revision of what you say and what you mean and how that affects the ego or the gross egotism of the potential, Talmud Chacham, so to speak. So these things need to be addressed, each one, and we have to address it. But we don't want to do it at the cost of giving up on leadership. That there needs to be a Rosh Hashiva, needs to be a Gadol Hadar. How do we do that in not a gross way? What made Rav Moshe a Gadol Hadar is his anivus, is his humility. And it combined with his really being the master of Torah, that he was dedicated to the people. Number 7, 3 Torah scholars and what they mean in a dream. Okay, let's take a look at that. One is Ben Azai. If you see him in a dream, you should anticipate Chassidut. The other is Ben Zoma. If you see him in a dream, you should anticipate wisdom. And the other one is Acher, Elisha ben Avuya, and then that's not a good sign. You should anticipate divine retribution. Okay, these are three of the four who entered into Pardes, the famous Gemara in Chagiga, about Arba Shenichnasu LaPardes, and only four who entered in Pardes. What that is, we've discussed in other places. I have a talk on what exactly that is, an introduction to entering into Pardes. So please look that up. To really be able to understand that Gemara, you should be listening to that talk as well. I will say that why three of the four, and where's Rabbi Akiva here? Why not just put Rabbi Akiva? Rabbi Akiva is the hero, and yet he's left out. Do we want to disassociate him with these other three somehow? I mean, and if we do, why is he appearing prominently in the story? And do we want to do both? Do we want to put him in the story and take him out when necessary? That's probably the case. So each one of these people represents something. It's interesting. So, for example, I believe that Ben Zoma, there's a machlokis, I believe, in Chagiga between Rashi and Tosas. It says that the reason why Ben Zoma died is because he saw the Shechina. So Tosas, that's how Rashi interprets it. Like you can't, like it's based on the biblical verse that lo yurani adam b'chai, a person can't see God and live. So he saw God and he died. Tosas is really bothered by that. He's saying, so that means that Ben Zoma saw higher than Moshe. We know you can't see higher than Moshe. It's an interesting question. It's a very technical question. It doesn't bother me, but apparently it bothered Tosas, so Tosas is another explanation. But the point is that there's this idea of going higher than you're supposed to go, to the point where you can't contain yourself in a vessel. And because you can't be alive in this world on that level of euphoria or light or whatever it is, the person has a death. And that could explain, the certain teachers explain that the death of Nadav and Avihu wasn't simply that they did something wrong. That's one way of reading it, is that they had this kalot hanefesh, they had this yearning with ratzo without shov, the yearning without an anchor, without a way of coming back into this world. So why would that be connected to Chachma? We see he's a wise man, that's true, but what wisdom was there if he wasn't able to integrate his wisdom into surviving and not going so high that he wasn't able to come back? One answer simply could be that's the nature. We talked about Bina before, about the mother being Bina. Bina means an anchor. A woman gives birth. She's able to take an idea, a brilliance, and give birth to it. So wisdom in itself, brilliance in itself, can leave you what we call luftmensch. You're in the air. You're not able to actualize things. So perhaps what it's saying is, you have the koach of chachma. It doesn't mean you're going to actualize it. It doesn't mean you're going to be able to articulate it or explain it, or definitely don't know how to write a book about it or be a teacher of it. But you still have great insight. Okay. That could be a little bit about it. And so on with each one, we could explain something along those lines, how what they did both in the rest of their lifetime. And then there's another question, that defining story, the fact that all three of these are three of the four, how defining is it into dreaming about them when they had other parts of their life beyond that story, before and after the story, except for, of course, Ben Zoma, who died. The Gemara continues. That's number 7. Now we're on to number 8. Number 8 is very interesting, about the series of things that are a 60th of something else. What's the 60th of something else? By the way, we've been on 57b for since number 7. And what are the 1/60th things? So, honey. Fire, honey, Shabbos, and sleep in a dream. Fire is 1/60th of Gehenna, of hell. Honey is 1/60th of the manna that we ate in the desert, the 40 years of the desert. Shabbos is 1/60th of the world to come. Sleep is 1/60th of death. A dream is 1/60th of prophecy. Okay. What's this idea of 1/60th here? So we also find the idea of 1/60th of batal b'shishim, and when it comes to certain laws of kashrut, something that's 1 to 60, 60 times more of the one that's kosher versus the one that's not kosher. In certain instances, not all, but certain instances, that's why you learn like taruvas and basar b'chalav. You learn certain sections in Yeridea, in rabbis learn those sections of the Shulchan Aruch to learn laws of kashrut. So there's this idea of this nullifying 1 in 60, which could be based on some broader understanding that something that's less than a 60th that isn't considered halachically there. But that's a strange number. Then to give that seems to be parallel. It's not a coincidence as 1 in 60 for both things: the bittul b'shishim, the nullification 1 in 60, and the 60th of Gehenim, 60th of Gan Eden, 60th of the good and bad things that we see in this honey and the fire and the Shabbos and so on. Or it could just be that 1 in 60 represents something that's not, it's there, but not in a concrete way, which is similar to the bittul b'shishim. And let's get more specific here. Let's take a look at these things, because I think if we get specific, we'll be able to understand. First of all, why does the Talmud bring these particular things? Was it 5 things? Yeah, 5 things. You got 5 fingers, you got 5 things. So you have Gan Eden and Gehenim, right? You got fire, which is Gehenim, and Shabbos, which is Gan Eden, which is interesting because I'd think honey would be if fire is Gehenim, shouldn't honey be the afterlife? No. Honey is like the manna, like the best food, spiritual food that we've ever had. So let's take a look at this. Let's take Shabbos, for example. Shabbos is a 60th of the world to come. Now, this is something that if you look in the Rambam, I don't know if I could find it, I wrote something about this about 7 years ago. The Rambam holds that the world to come is a state of consciousness that we develop through a certain philosophy, worldview, and practice that we start experiencing in this world, that we're able to kind of dissociate ourselves with our pure physical being and associate ourselves with our higher intellect levels. And once we start living this philosophical, ethical, spiritual life, for lack of a better word, we already begin to kind of enter into this olam haba. So Shabbos, in a sense, represents, in the words of, he's quoting one of his ancestors possibly, the Slonimer Rebbe in the in his Nesiva Shalom says that to have access to Gan Eden, you have to have had a Gan Eden experience in this world. And that access, that key that we have the experience in this world is Shabbos. And that Nesiva Shalom that he's quoting some Rebbe that came before him goes very well together with the Rambam. And it fits in with the Gemara. I'm not saying that's the pshat in the Gemara, but it is a reading of the Gemara. In other words, Shabbos gives you a taste of paradise and gives you access to paradise. So if you want to know why sometimes I go somewhere on Shabbos, I'm like, it's cute, it's nice. I won't say it's not Shabbos, but I'm not tasting the paradise. Okay, that's one thing. So that's why, for example, there's a certain kedusha, there's a certain sense of something when you have somebody who's Shomer Shabbos has like a connection to Olam Haba, basically. They have connection to this world of truth that if you're just a scholar, you're missing. You may have access to more information than people are Shomer Shabbos because you're a PhD, you're a college professor, but there's still like, you're not getting the Me'ein Olam Haba in it. You're getting wisdom, you're getting ideas, you're getting stimulated, your mind may be stimulated, but you're not getting that sense of the Olam Haba. Okay, so here's one that I like, the juxtaposition of a sleep being a 60th of death and a dream being a 60th of prophecy. So it's quite fascinating because when sleep is a little death because you're not active. There's a fear that a lot of people are afraid when they go to sleep. How do they know they're going to wake up? That's interesting. It's the keeping them up that's going to kill them. It's not them going to sleep. I'll tell you that. Going to sleep will keep you alive. But the thing that we fear becomes the thing that gets in the way of what it is. Like the fear itself is undermining. The fear is undermining us, basically. But that is what it is. We got to deal with that, and it's a lot to deal with. I can't deal with that. Talk to your psychologist, and they need a living also. So, death and prophet and dreaming and prophecy. So, on the one hand, what happens when you're sleeping? It's actually really working out very nicely if you think about it. Why? Because you're giving up on activity when you go to sleep. On the other hand, only when you sleep are you in a dream state. A lot of the prophecies happen in a dream state. Most prophecies probably happen in a dream state, meaning certain levels of unlocking the unconsciousness can't be done when we're up. And that's why if you understand a little bit about the spiritual nature of a person and their unconsciousness and dreams, which you can if you study this Talmud, study sections of the Zohar, study sections of other Kabbalistic literature, study contemporary understanding of dreams, and put them together, you'll come up with a nice understanding of why dreams can be a 60th of prophecy. Again, when are dreams a 60th of prophecy? It's based on the person. If the person is working on themselves and living the holier a life that you're living, the more disattached you are from chasing physical pleasures, and the more you overcome that, the more the dreams will access holy things in them. Okay, that was number 8. Number 9 is shoes of dead people. It's very interesting here. So the Gemara says that if you see a dead body in the house, that's a good sign, a sign of peace. If he ate, that person who died ate or drank, that's also a good sign. If he took things out of the house, it's also that's a bad sign. Rav Papa explains that's only going on the shoes or sandals. That's the only thing that would be a bad sign if a dead person took those items out of the house, took his shoes or sandals. But if he took anything else, it's a good sign. So what I want to suggest here is that this custom, that although it doesn't appear in the Shulchan Aruch, it appears in Sefer Hasidim and appears in later rules about death and mourning. What do we do in a person's shoes after they die? Do we give away their shoes? Do relatives take their shoes? And this has come up a number of times where people have asked me this question. I remember when my grandfather, B'li Chaim, passed away, they said, he had some nice clothes. We can give that away. His shoes, there's a number of rabbis, all of his, pretty much all of his kids, his son-in-laws have smicha, most of them, and they were just saying, no, we're going to dispose of his shoes based on this law. Once in a while I get asked a question, the person had a lot of shoes, including shoes that he hardly wore. So they're very well, they're unworn almost, and they're worth something. Can we sell them? Can we give them away? Now, why is that even a question? It's not in the Shulchan Aruch. This Gemara doesn't seem to be addressing it. It's about a dream. And the answer is that there's usually three approaches, and the fourth approach I find, I don't really find, which is, I take the fourth approach. The three approaches are that it's not in the Shulchan Aruch, and it's, so one approach is that it has something to do with the illness, that the person may have left something detrimental in their shoe, and you shouldn't wear the shoe. And then if that's the case, so then if they weren't wearing the shoe when they were ill, you'd be able to use those shoes. Okay. Another answer is that it's not even going on. Really, it was a misprint. If you change one of the letters from a hey, a ches to a hey, it's not going on it's not going on a dead person. It's going on a dead animal. Okay, and a lot of people answer it like that. That's not the answer. It's not the answer. It's really not the answer. B'chvod, Tarasan and everything like that. All the people who like to amend texts. I'll tell you what the answer is. The answer is that there was an ancient tradition that the Zohar talks about. The Zohar calls it an ancient tradition, and that has to do with the idea of the shoe being connected to not just the chalitza of the when a levirate marriage can be, instead of married, they can release the woman through this her undoing the shoe of the brother-in-law. There is also this idea of chalipin. Chalipin is a form of a kinyan. According to the Zohar, that was primarily done through a shoe. Anyway, the Zohar basically has a whole conversation where the shoe represents a certain level of a vessel of the soul. That because of that, when we say you can't walk a mile, and you can't judge a person until you've walked a mile in their shoes, and you don't walk in their shoes because their shoes are like their physical, like kind of body-soul connection. You don't know who they are. So there's this ancient tradition that already existed probably before the Sefer Hasidim, and it's this Gemara may or may not be. It's part of the Gemara mentions things about shoes a number of times of the dead. It's an existing tradition by the time the Shulchan Aruch came out. Why it's not the Shulchan Aruch? We don't follow Shulchan Aruch in every way. The many things Shulchan Aruch says we don't do, and many things Shulchan Aruch says it doesn't mention, and we do them anyway. So I'm not saying that this is we ignore the Shulchan Aruch. We take it seriously, but what I will say is that what I do advise people is don't give it to friends and relatives. If you really think they're worthwhile, give it to Goodwill or something like that. Or if there's money, sell it to, people who are not gonna, so to speak. You're not giving it away to friends and family if you need to. My preference is just to give it away for people who could use it. If there's something special, they're not something special, just throw them out. That's number 9. Number 10 is when Moshiach comes, will we accept converts? Will we not accept converts? Will everyone convert? And that's the end of the daf. And it has to do with the blessings you make in Eretz Yisrael or in Chutz La'aretz. So, for example, we say, if you see the Markulis, it's a type of idol. So you say, blessed is God who's slow to anger to those who go against His will. If you see a place in Eretz Yisrael where idolatry is uprooted, you make another bracha. Now we're going back. We're finished with the pages and pages of dreams, and now we're going back to Berachot that we left off with in the Mishnah on 54a, and it's quoting from the Mishnah. Shimon ben Elazar says that in Israel they would say a blessing about having uprooted idolatry, but you don't say it in Israel. You don't say the line "V'hashiv leiv ovdehem la'avdecha," and you bring back the hearts of those who serve them to serve you. You don't say that in Chutz La'aretz, because most people are idolaters. They're not going to worship God. And if Shimon ben Elazar says, no, even in Chutz La'aretz, we say that you should bring back the idolaters to worshiping God. Why? Because Sha'asin Lizgai, they are going to convert. Shnamar oz ha'hapoch alamin safa v'rura. Will change the nations to speak a pure language. So basically, on a simple level, we now have three opinions about what's going to happen when Moshiach will come. One opinion is the whole world will convert. Now, it doesn't say what that means. It doesn't mean they're going to be forced to convert. God forbid. That's not the point at all. It means that they'll see God's oneness and they'll all convert. Now, I'd say there's two ways of learning that. They'll all convert to Judaism, A. B, no, they won't convert to Judaism. They'll convert to the Noachites. Because according to Rashi, a Noachite not only believes in God, he even keeps Shabbos. Doesn't keep Pesach, doesn't keep Tefillin and Mezuzah, but he keeps Shabbos, according to Rashi. We don't paskin like Rashi, but it's an interesting Rashi. That's A and B in that shita. A second shita would be, no, we won't accept converts. That's probably following the shita of the Rambam that says, in very good times, we should not take converts. Maybe they're just coming for the money, the power. Like in the time of King David and King Solomon. And the third way, which is probably might be the halacha, is that it'll be like today. Those who want to convert will convert, and most people won't convert. And that's the answer. It'll be the same. So there's A, B, and C, and Teku, when Mashiach will come, we'll know which one it is. Thank you for watching.